Welcome to The Chain, the podcast that connects the dots in global technology and geopolitics. I'm your host, Brittany Jones, and today we're diving into a topic that's been making waves in international relations and the tech world, the geopolitics of semiconductor supply chains. Joining me to break this down is Matt Lehman, an expert on global tech policy and supply chain issues. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Brittany. It's great to be here to discuss such a critical issue.
So, Matt, let's start with the basics. For our listeners who might not be familiar, can you give us a quick overview of why semiconductors are so important in today's world?
Absolutely. So, semiconductors are essentially the brains of modern technology. They're these tiny chips that power everything from our smartphones and laptops to advanced AI systems and military equipment. Without semiconductors, our digital world as we know it simply wouldn't exist. And what's really crucial to understand is that the semiconductor industry is incredibly complex. It requires cutting-edge research, specialized manufacturing facilities, and intricate supply networks that span multiple countries.
That complexity sounds like it could create some vulnerabilities. Who are the major players in the semiconductor industry right now?
Well, the industry is dominated by a handful of countries and regions. The United States has long been a leader in semiconductor innovation, with companies like Intel, Nvidia, and Qualcomm. But when it comes to advanced manufacturing, Taiwan and South Korea are the powerhouses. Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, or TSMC, produces over half of the world's semiconductors and about 90% of the most advanced chips. South Korea's Samsung is another major player. Then you have China, which has been investing heavily in developing its own semiconductor capabilities. And the European Union is working to boost its role in the industry as well.
Interesting. So, it sounds like the industry is pretty concentrated in East Asia. Why is that a concern from a geopolitical perspective?
That's a great question, Brittany. The concentration in East Asia, particularly in Taiwan, creates significant geopolitical risks. Taiwan's complex relationship with China is a major factor here. Any disruption to Taiwan's semiconductor industry, whether from natural disasters, political instability, or, in a worst-case scenario, military conflict, could have severe consequences for the global economy and technology sector. This reliance on Taiwan has become a key strategic concern, especially for countries like the United States.
I see. So how are different countries responding to these risks?
We're seeing a range of strategies, but the common theme is a push for greater self-sufficiency in semiconductor production. The United States, for example, has passed the CHIPS and Science Act, which aims to boost domestic manufacturing and reduce reliance on foreign suppliers. This includes billions in subsidies for companies to build new semiconductor factories in the U.S. The European Union has its own European CHIPS Act with similar goals. China, facing export restrictions from the U.S. on advanced semiconductor technology, is doubling down on developing its own capabilities. And we're seeing emerging players like India trying to position themselves as alternative manufacturing hubs.
That's fascinating. It sounds like semiconductors have become a real battleground in international relations. Can you talk a bit more about the US-China dynamic here?
Absolutely. The U.S.-China relationship is really at the heart of the semiconductor geopolitics right now. The U.S. has been imposing increasingly strict export controls on advanced semiconductor technology to China, aiming to slow down China's technological advancement, particularly in areas with military applications. This includes restrictions on selling advanced chip-making equipment to Chinese companies. China, in response, is pouring massive resources into developing its own semiconductor ecosystem to reduce its reliance on Western technology. This tech decoupling, as some call it, is reshaping global supply chains and forcing companies to navigate a complex geopolitical landscape.
Wow, it really is a complex situation. You mentioned India earlier as an emerging player. Can you elaborate on the role South Asia might play in the future of semiconductor supply chains?
Sure thing. India is positioning itself as a potential alternative in the global semiconductor supply chain. The Indian government has launched what they call the Semiconductor Mission, offering around $10 billion in incentives to attract investments from major players like TSMC, Intel, and Foxconn. The goal is to establish India as a semiconductor manufacturing hub. This initiative is part of a broader strategy to capitalize on the ongoing geopolitical shifts and the desire of many countries and companies to diversify their supply chains away from China. India's large and growing digital economy, along with its strategic position, make it an attractive option for some companies looking to reduce geopolitical risks.
That's really interesting. It seems like every major economy is trying to secure its place in the semiconductor industry. Are there any other trends or developments we should be watching?
Definitely. One key trend is the increasing demand for advanced semiconductors driven by emerging technologies like AI, IoT, and 5G. This is intensifying the competition for semiconductor leadership. Another important development is the growing focus on supply chain resilience. The COVID-19 pandemic exposed vulnerabilities in global supply chains, leading to chip shortages that affected industries from automotive to consumer electronics. This has prompted a rethinking of supply chain strategies, with more emphasis on diversification and redundancy. We're also seeing increased attention to sustainability in semiconductor manufacturing, which is traditionally a very energy-intensive process. And lastly, there's a trend towards greater international collaboration among like-minded countries. For instance, the US, Japan, Taiwan, and South Korea are exploring ways to cooperate on semiconductor supply chain security.
Those are all fascinating developments. Now, I'm curious about the economic implications of all this. How might these geopolitical shifts in the semiconductor industry affect the global economy?
That's a crucial question, Brittany. The economic implications are potentially enormous. First, we're likely to see significant shifts in investment patterns. Countries offering incentives for semiconductor manufacturing could see large inflows of capital and technology. This could create new economic hubs and job opportunities in those regions. However, it's important to note that building a competitive semiconductor industry from scratch is incredibly challenging and expensive. Even with government support, it takes years to develop the necessary infrastructure and expertise. On the flip side, regions that currently dominate the industry might face challenges as production potentially shifts to new locations. Another key economic impact relates to trade patterns. As countries pursue semiconductor self-sufficiency, we might see changes in global trade flows and potentially increased costs for certain technologies if production becomes less efficient due to fragmentation.
Those are some significant potential impacts. It sounds like companies in the tech sector will need to navigate a pretty complex landscape in the coming years.
Absolutely. Tech companies, especially those heavily reliant on advanced semiconductors, are having to rethink their supply chain strategies. Many are looking to diversify their suppliers and even considering bringing some production in-house. They're also having to navigate an increasingly complex regulatory environment, with different countries imposing various restrictions and requirements. This could potentially lead to increased costs and complications in product development and manufacturing processes. Companies might need to create multiple versions of products for different markets to comply with various regulations. It's a challenging situation that requires careful strategic planning and geopolitical awareness.
Wow, it really is a complex issue with far-reaching implications. As we wrap up, Matt, what do you think are the key takeaways for our listeners about the geopolitics of semiconductor supply chains?
Great question to conclude with, Brittany. I think there are several key points to keep in mind. First, semiconductors are absolutely critical to modern technology and economics, making them a central issue in geopolitics and national security. Second, the current concentration of advanced semiconductor manufacturing in a few locations, particularly Taiwan, creates significant risks that countries are now actively trying to mitigate. Third, we're seeing a global push towards greater semiconductor self-sufficiency, with major investments and policy initiatives in the US, EU, China, and emerging players like India. Fourth, the US-China tech rivalry is reshaping global semiconductor supply chains with implications for companies and economies worldwide. And finally, these shifts in the semiconductor industry will likely have profound effects on global trade, investment patterns, and technological development in the coming years. It's a dynamic situation that will require ongoing attention and adaptation from policymakers, businesses, and technologists alike.
Thank you, Matt, for that comprehensive overview. It's clear that the semiconductor industry is at the intersection of technology, economics, and geopolitics, making it a fascinating and critical area to watch. To our listeners, we hope this discussion has helped shed light on the complex world of semiconductor supply chains and their geopolitical implications. Remember to stay tuned to The Chain for more insights into the global tech landscape. Until next time, I'm Brittany Jones, and this has been The Chain.